Warning, local radiation readings exhibit characteristics consistent with total degradation of the Aurora's dark matter drive core. A quantum detonation will occur with a probability of 85.5%. Advise observing a 1 kilometer safety range.
Hello everybody, and welcome to a quick look at Subnautica. I'm not going to bother describing the game because I'm assuming you've already looked into that and you want to know about the gameplay. It's a lot of fun. I incredibly enjoy it. Everything is pretty intuitive to figure out, so I'm actually talking over recording on the video. You have to go and find items and scan everything. I really enjoy finding the creature eggs, and I'm actually building up aquariums and collecting all the different creatures inside of them because, yeah, I'm going to pretend I'm a marine biologist. When you first start playing, the only point of reference you have in the map is the Aurora, always looming in the distance. You also start out in a life pod, complete with a medical kit, a fabricator unit, and some snacks for the road. The only way to craft is through the fabricator, so I definitely recommend that be the first thing you build when you make a base. There's quite a bit of biodiversity in the game, and it's always fun to find a new creature to scan. This can be incredibly hard to do with some of the larger predators, but I ended up stealing their eggs and scanning the babies that hatch from them instead. Even better, they're a lot cuter and less hostile when they're sitting in your tanks. There's an AI that tells you if your vitals are dropping too low. And while sometimes I found this annoying, it did end up saving me on more than one occasion. As the game went on, I learned how to use the environment to my advantage. Like when I would use the air bubbles that spawned from the brain coral to make it so I could stay underwater for longer lengths of time. Not having to make so many trips to the surface was extremely beneficial for my scavenging. Once you get the habitat builder created, you now have the option to build your own base wherever you'd like it to be. In my current game, I actually have 4 of them built, which ended up taking a lot of materials, but that just adds to the challenge. You actually have to keep in mind such things as hull integrity, which means the deeper down that you decide to build your base, the more reinforcements that you're going to have to put in. I've heard a lot about people having trouble with this, but I was lucky enough to stumble upon lithium pretty early in my game, and so I was able to go and reinforce most of my walls. And so I haven't had a single hull breach. This game does exploration extremely well. Probably my favorite part is diving into random caves and hoping I don't get killed, but discovering awesome things in the process. You discover a fair bit of the story this way, as you try and discover what happened to all of the other people that were on the Aurora with you. Most of the wreckages around the map spawn blueprints for different items, so it's very useful to check them out. Sound is extremely important in the game, and you actually have to listen to your environment. I've been scared on more than one occasion where a large creature has been howling at me and I thought it was farther away, when it turned out to be a lot closer than expected. Earlier in the gameplay, it was really hard for me to distinguish which predator was making what sound, causing me to be afraid of reapers when it was just a bone shark. Predators also seem to stalk useful blueprints, so be careful. The game does have many positives, such as beautiful environments, massive 3-dimensional space to explore, it doesn't hold your hand, but it isn't unforgiving, believable biodiversity, and a lot of stuff to build and use. There are still a few cons like any game is bound to have. Some of these are probably because it is still in alpha, but most of my gripes have to do with performance issues, like massive lag spikes when spawning large creatures, and a loading screen that makes you think your computer has crashed. Also, the game does crash a fair bit, so make sure to save very often. With patience, your game will probably work, and it is very worth it. The game can be so beautiful, with environments like the one I'm currently showing, and yet so terrifying, really nailing that fear of deep water that I'm sure everybody has just a tiny bit. That fear of just not knowing what awaits you in the abyss below. It does make it easier later in the game, when you've built the sea moth and eventually the cyclops, to go deeper down with a bit more protection.
Warning.
One other bonus way of playing that I like to do is when you turn your HUD off, so you actually have no visual indicators of your air supply, hunger, thirst, health, or the beacon where your home is, which adds an extra layer of survivability onto the game. Your inventory and everything else you have to interact with still works perfectly fine without the HUD. It also makes the AI telling you about your vitals a lot more useful and welcomed. There is a hardcore mode for people who are braver than me. For the rest of us, there is survival and creative. While the aurora is always visible on the horizon no matter how far away from it you are, there are actually 2 other places above sea level that you don't actually see until you're close enough to them. The only reason I discovered they existed is because I accidentally read about them on the wiki. Turns out I'd actually come really close to one of them, but I thought I was in dead water and turned around right before it would have spawned into my field of vision. They do have very useful resources located on both of them, but they are one of the most unfinished parts of the game, with a lot of the flora not actually having entries into the PDA yet. But that's early access for you. I ended up hiding in this abandoned base all night because those crabs were very scary. And that brings us to the end of the review. I don't feel like I should have a rating system on games, so I'm not going to bother with that part. I just am going to say that I do recommend this game, but if you want a finished game, I do recommend waiting until it's out of early access. My justification for game purchases is if I know the game is going to give me at least 1 hour of gameplay for every dollar spent on it, then the game's worth it. And this game has already more than doubled that for me. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful.